I thought I'd do a little bit of an experiment today. I'm going to paint on this little canvas covered board, just a cheap one from a local art shop. Now I've picked up a tub of this stuff. It's Watercolour Ground. This one's made by Daniel Smith. There are a few other brands about. I bought this myself, so I'm not being paid for this demonstration at all. But the blurb says that a couple of coats of this on pretty much any surface and you can paint watercolour straight onto it. And I was quite intrigued to give it a go and basically see if it works. Now, I've already given this canvas a coat, so I'll give it another quick coat now. And I'm applying it with a soft synthetic brush. I don't want any of the ridges or little lumps and bumps. I'm going to try and get it as smooth as I can. So soft brush is best for that. And like I said, they in their little blurb, their little bit of write-up about it, it says that you can pretty much paint on any surface with a couple of coats of this. So quite intriguing really to see how it works. I've kind of got a feeling that it's not going to work the same as a paper surface. But you never know, it might create some interesting effects. Now I think some people use it as kind of almost like a correcting fluid. So if you've been working on something quite detailed, I suppose, I tend to not worry about mistakes, but maybe if you've been working on a portrait or something like that and you've made like a glaring mistake, you could possibly use this as a correcting fluid and then lay a little bit over the mistake area and then work back into it. I'm not sure if that works or whether that would stand out, but if you've used this, let me know how you use it. Put a little comment down, and it's interesting to see what other people will do with it. And so now I'm just trying to get as smooth a surface as I can really. And I want a little bit of texture, but I don't want any real lumps and bumps. Okay, I've dried that coat off now and it's fairly smooth. There's a couple of tiny little lumps and bumps. It's quite a chalky texture. So I'm quite intrigued to see how this is going to work. I've got a feeling it's not going to work in the same way as paper that I'll be able to get a wet wash on, but I'm going to try anyway. I'll paint in my usual manner. So straight away I can see that it's very absorbent. So I've laid that paint on and it's soaked straight in. So I'll give it a quick mist, I think. Get some water on there and hopefully the paint will move around a little bit. Now it's quite an unusual surface. I've got my board at about 20 degrees there or thereabouts, as I usually would. And the paint isn't flowing as such. It's kind of sitting on the surface. And so it's in a way giving me the feeling of painting with acrylics. And I've got the paint quite wet now and it's not really flowing at all. It's not really moving. I'll lay some slightly thicker paint in there now as well. Now the surface it's accepting the paint, but it's kind of beading up ever so slightly. I'm not sure if you can see that on the camera. I mean, maybe I should have given it another coat. Maybe 3 coats would be better. I'm not sure. I mean, if you do use this, then do let me know. If you've got a better way of applying it, then I'll be interested to hear. So I'm laying paint in next to the previous layer, and it's not really blending together very much. And like I said, it's kind of giving me the feeling that I'm painting with wet acrylic. I'm just giving the surface another quick mist, and the water droplets seem to be very much sitting on the surface. Now, there were a few little runs starting to happen, but they're not spreading out as such. They're just following the lines of my brush marks, really, from applying the ground. I'll bring this wash all the way down, I think, and then I'll dry it off and see how it dries. Maybe it will dry quite smooth. But it's definitely an interesting surface. It's a completely different way of working. I'm not really fully convinced that I like it at the moment. But like with everything new, you have to find a way of making it work. I'll just grab a piece of paper towel now. I'll see if I can lift the surface as well, see how that works. I'll lift out the shape of a sun there on the horizon, and it seems to lift okay. And lift out a little reflection across the water as well. Okay, it seems to work okay. It doesn't lift out as well as it would on a cotton paper. I'll lay a little bit more paint into these clouds, see if I can lay over the top. That's not really working. It's kind of disturbing the layer underneath, even though I'm going in with slightly drier, thicker paint. Let's try and darken this little cloud shape as well. And again, it's disturbing the surface underneath quite quickly there. So it's definitely different from working on paper. It doesn't create a paper surface by any means. I think it's something that I'll probably have to play around with a little bit and get used to it. That quick mist. I think I'll dry that now. Okay, I've dried that off with the heat gun. And the paint has definitely absorbed into the ground, so it's fixed. So that's not going anywhere. It's not rubbing off with my hands or anything like that. So I'm going to see if I can lay on top now. I'll mix up some dark. I've got some blue, and I'll drop a little bit of burnt sienna into it. I'll swap brushes. Actually, that rigger's not going to work, I don't think. So some ultramarine, a little bit of burnt sienna. And I'll see if I can lay a little bit of landing over the top. Okay, that appears to be working okay. Again, it's very absorbent, so as soon as I lay the paint in, it kind of dries instantly. So I'll give it a tiny little mist, I think, with the bottle, because I didn't want the paint to move around a touch. I suppose working with paper, you very much get used to the fact that you can lay in over the top and build up layers and tiny little bits of water in there, and the paint will flow, where this doesn't have that same property. Like I said, I've said it a couple of times now, but it is very much reminds me of working with acrylics or with wet acrylic on a gesso type surface. So I've laid a little bit of distance in there as well. I quite like the way that's gone on. It's quite accidental in a way, but I've got some little hard and or light and dark edges there, and it kind of happened on its own. Let's try and lay some darks in, coming towards the foreground. So I'll mix up some quite dark, thick paint now. Let's get some little boat shapes in there. And see if I can get some hard edges. Okay, they're going on quite nicely. Again, the surface is very absorbent, so pretty much as soon as the brush hits it, the paint soaks into it straight away. Let's try and get some little bits of dry brush as well. It seems to work quite nicely. It picks up the texture of my brush marks. I could drag that across quite quickly. That seems to work okay. Let's see if I can get some real dark shapes laid in over the top. So it certainly does allow for layering. I can drag in a few little masts. Now it certainly is a different way of working. And for a first attempt, I'm quite happy. I think I'd have to spend a little bit more time and practice and work out the best way of going about it. Just lay a few little areas down in the foreground now as well. Again, little bits of dry brush, little bits of texture. And it's quite interesting the way it goes down. It's very much, I suppose because it's a different surface, so it's giving me the feeling of working with oils or acrylics. But without a lot of the hassle in many ways. It's obviously very quick, because I'm still working with watercolour. And to be fair, the surface does accept the paint quite well. It's just it accepts it in a different way, which is it's quite difficult to explain really. But if you're looking for a different way of working, then it is interesting nonetheless. I'll drag in a few little reflections across the water as well, and they're going on quite well. And so it does enable me to have a very light touch with the brush, which is quite nice. I'll lay a few little bits of some distant masts in there as well and bring a reflection down at the same time. And that works perfectly well. It's not disturbing the surface underneath, so once it's dry it does seem like it's perfectly fixed. I'll switch back to the slightly larger brush now, mix up some strong dark. I'll have that quite thick. Let's lay some dry brush down in the foreground. And now that accepts it quite well, but I think because I've already laid some paint down, it probably would have been better to dry that first. But I think that's a demo finished. I'll leave it at that. Okay, there's the finished painting. I'm kind of happy with it. Not really happy with the shapes I got in the clouds. I need to get used to how to lay the paint in on this different surface. Now, I think probably the best approach would be a similar approach painting or acrylic painting, where you build up layers rather than attempting to lay in wet into wet. It's not a surface that really accepts that technique. But it was fun to try anyway. It was an interesting experiment. If you've used these grounds before, let me know how you use them. Let me know the best practice, if there is one. Anyway, that's the demo finished. It's a nice simple little experiment. So I'll be back again next week with another video. And do check me out on Patreon, where I have lots of full demonstrations over there. Lots of different stuff that's not on YouTube. So check that out. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.